I can say the same thing as another person online, but without the credibility, it doesn't mean the same thing. So have you ever seen the artists or the musicians or the painters that go on the street and they try to sell their stuff? They might sell their painting for $1 million in the studio, but then they'll put it on the street and people won't give them $5 for it.
Right.
That's perceived value. So if they don't perceive value in that person, then the thing that they're saying or doing or showing has no value to them. So while I was saying the same things, all my methods that I eventually turned in my book, people don't perceive any value. Who are you? They don't know who I am. I'm saying the same thing as Dan Martell or Alex Hormozy or any of these people, but it has no value because I'm a nobody, right? They don't know who I am. I don't have anything.
Hey, so my name's Jesse, and welcome to the Mobile Podcast Trailer. Today, I am joined with my good friend Kable Record, and in this episode, we are talking about his book, The Fourth Generation Formula, and also Oscar, which right now you guys don't know what Oscar is, but by the end of this episode, you certainly will. But if this is your first time here, I'm going to read a little statement. This podcast is for the creatives, the dreamers, the risk takers who never planned on being entrepreneurs, but found themselves building something anyway. We sit down with local business owners to talk about the real journey behind the work, the creativity, the pressure, the doubt, and the moments that made it all worth it. If you've ever thought, how did I end up here? This is the place for you.
The only thing that matters is the personal mindset of that one person and what they're focusing on, and everything else falls short of that. I mean,
Right.
if you have the wrong mindset, then you cannot be successful. I think that's the main thing I learned this last year is mindset. I thought, and I was reading some comments on a Myron Golden video, and I had to laugh. The guy he was complaining because Myron was once again talking about mindset.
Right.
And I felt bad for the guy because clearly he doesn't get it, right? There's a reason that Myron or Dan or like all these guys talk about mindset so much, because it's literally the thing. Like if you don't get the mindset right in the beginning,
Yeah.
everything else is going to suffer. And when I learned that this last year and I got my mindset in the right place in the beginning, everything else fell into place.
Right.
I mean, that's why
With
what I start with
with
in my book.
with also, we can't just say that mindset is like your mindset is a choice. So like you have to, because there are moments, like my days can be a roller coaster of emotion. There are moments where I go, this is going to work. This mobile podcast trailer is going to win. And then there are moments where I'm like, crap, what have I done? And you have to then kind of climb your way back out to the right mindset to put yourself back into the right position of, no, I can make this successful. Like I'm going to choose to swing at the ball every moment of this day. And it's a numbers game. So, I started running ads for this, and I've had lots of conversations with people that have no idea what they want to talk about. And they're like, oh, I like your idea of having a podcast. And I'm like, cool. What do you want your podcast to be about? Well, I don't know. My story? Well, what's your story? And like, I'm learning that the guys that keep on ending up on these podcasts, they have talking points. They have their set talking points. They have their ways to hook you and ways to get you in to understanding their methods. and their mindset, and they draw you in. And then if you keep on listening to the same, to them over and over again, you're like, oh, okay, this is what they talk about. So I'm choosing my lane.
It's
And
funny, there's 2 points there. One is that I had multiple times last year where my progress outpaced my identity. So, who I thought I was trailing behind the progress that I was making, right?
unpack that a little bit.
So your identity is who you see yourself as, right? I have an identity, and some people identify as poor, some people identify as rich. You can identify as whoever you want. I started last year with a goal of $100 million net worth in 5 years, right? That's a big part of my book. And it's not so much that the money means that much to me. It's that the goal is what creates the change.
Hmm.
By making that goal, I had to become a different person. The path I was on would not lead to $100 million. So I had to fundamentally change who I was so that I was capable of reaching that goal. And a goal becomes so much easier if you work backwards from it. So I don't have to just learn like how do I make $100 million. I only have to figure out what do I have to do today. So you can work backwards from a goal 5 years from now. Well, what do I have to do 4 years from now, 1 year from now, 6 months from now, 1 month? What do I have to do today? Right. And that's all I focus on is what is the thing that I need to do today that leads to that goal. And that's what I spent this last year doing. And so, anyways, I outpaced my identity multiple times where I had to like catch back up. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is big. This is a big thing because I made a lot of progress last year.
One of the things that you said is $100 million net worth. Um, and if you really break it down to $100 million, like you said, the money part isn't the important aspect.
Mm-mm.
What it is that the goal, and we've talked about this before, but the goal um, of that $100 million is that statistically speaking, you reach 40% of what your written goal is. And the reason why I say written goal is because it has to be written down. I've noticed that when I've written down a goal, almost every time, it's always 40%. So, um, along, several years ago, I I had a goal of $120,000 a year. Um, and I told my CPA, and he was like, "Oh, you should really have like 124,000 be your goal because you enter a new tax bracket or something like that." I can't. It's an arbitrary
Sure.
number. Um, but I was like, okay, well then that's it. But I was reading a book, and it said that you reach 40% of your goal, and so I like did the math. And at the time, I was working for University of Phoenix or GCU. I can't remember. Basically the same company. Um, and I did the math, and my salary was 40% of that goal. And I was like, well, crap, I need to set a new goal.
Hmm.
And so I was like, all right, well, 250,000. And just bumping it up to realistic numbers. You know, I tend to be somewhat of a dream. I am a dreamer, but I am also a realistic dreamer, and maybe that's because of my mindset, because um I don't think that positively of myself. Um, but what ended up happening was I realized a little bit further down the road that I reached that 40%, and I was like, oh, well, I gotta kick it up. Well, recently I discovered that my most recent goal of 450,000 a year was met at the 40% mark too. And I was like, well, crap. Now I have to set a new goal. And so like if we're going back to your $100 million net worth, if your net worth reaches 40 million, that's still an awesome number. If if our if our take home, when we were kids, I don't know about you, but when I was a kid, six figures was like the marker of wealth.
Mhm.
In the culture that I grew up in, um, we grew up in Awatuki, so it was like we called it all white Tuki. So it was, a big, it's like the cul-de-sac of America, and a lot of people in those regions were making six figures. And so we just identified that as the marker to hit. Um, and now that we've reached those numbers, I I've never felt more poor. Um,
That's inflation.
yeah, welcome to inflation. But now everybody's talking about the $1 million mark. And it's like I really think that if we're gonna achieve 40% of our written goal, you have to really make your goal, quite large to even come close to achieving what you're doing. So, $1 million goal, even though I don't really necessarily want $1 million a year, um, that's a marker that I need to start shooting for.
Well, first of all, those numbers are relative. A burger's 10 times more than it was when I was a kid. So $100,000 and $1 million really are the same thing.
Right.
Um, I started last year with a different identity, and to build the right identity, I had an identity statement that I said, and I would recite it in my head constantly. Every time I drove somewhere, I would just repeat it over and over and over in my head. I had a list of goals, and I would study those goals. They had pictures in them. I would try to visualize those things and implant that into my identity of this is who I am. And interesting thing, what happens is that eventually becomes unnecessary. I don't have to recite that identity statement today because it is who I am. I am that person. I became that person that I recited that identity statement for, to the point where that is who I identify inside of myself, right? So when you talk about uh, being negative towards yourself, that's how you identify. And until
Yep.
you systematically uh, change that and approach it, then you'll always be limited where you're at now, right?
Mhm.
You'll be limited, whatever that subjective growth point is, whatever that metric would be. Like you will have a limit at a point that you don't have to have, right? But you will have until you are able to move past that identity, until you can decide that that's not the person you are. You'll be stuck there.
Right.
And that was an interesting point because I didn't realize that was going to happen. I was just doing, what I was being told, like what I was learning from my coaches. Like, all right, well, I need to have a list and I need to have an identity statement and I need to do these things. And so I started doing them. And I didn't realize that that would become part of who I am. And then I wouldn't have to continuously look at those lists and read that statement and recite it in my head. One day I'm like, I realized, oh, I don't need this anymore, and so I moved past it.
That's interesting because I guess one of the one of the things that I'll say is um, I started kind of um, this journey on losing weight and getting healthy, and I lost like I don't know 30 pounds or so, and at one point I no longer needed to look at the list of food that I was
Mhm.
supposed to eat
Yeah.
because I had repeatedly looked at it and it became a part of what I was doing, so much so that I just knew what was next.
It went from a diet to how you eat,
Right.
right? A diet is a short-term thing, and by design, but eventually a diet just turns into how you eat. I mean, some people, the way I eat, would call that a diet from their
Mhm.
how they normally eat. It's just the way I eat.
Yeah.
Hey, can you turn the heat up? Now I'm cold.
All right. Can can you turn it to 76? That's okay. We'll edit this part out.
Appreciate it.
Good work.
Good. You want me to discuss like my progress through that this last year? Or what do you want to go next?
Yeah, let's talk about that.
I mean, because I can discuss starting with Dan Martell
Yep.
and you know my progress, the things like voice quote, and then eventually where it landing today with my book and Oscar.
Yeah. So, at the end of this, what we'll do is we'll shoot an intro
Yeah.
for it. So, yeah, talk about um so tell me a little bit about how all of this kind of started for you and kind of where you're at today.
You know, I've been really focusing on my own personal growth since around 2020-ish. Um, I had spent the last 14 years raising kids, and they were finally getting old enough that I could spend a little bit of time on myself. And I started cleaning up my diet. I was eating a bag of salt and vinegar chips every day.
That sounds great.
I was
That sounds like
I was the worst shape I had gotten to my whole life, and I've worked out and been healthy my whole life, and I just anyway, so I cleaned up my diet, I started getting back to the gym, I did all the things, but, um, this last year, February, I read Dan Martell's book, Buy Back Your Time,
mhm
and it just captured my interest to the extent that I was part of his elite business coaching program a week later,
mhm.
and it was expensive. I mean, I
Yeah.
spent
I
I
remember when you told me you got into it and I was like that's
Yeah, it wasn't cheap, but it was such
tell
a great
tell people
investment.
tell the 12 people the number.
It was 9 grand. So for 9 grand, I got to be a part of Dan Martell's, coaching network. Once a week, we have a
And how many
I don't
people were
know,
in
I
that?
think there's maybe 1,000 now. Um, he's only been doing it a couple of years. He's pretty new into it. It's not like he's done it for the last 15 years.
Right. He's not
Um,
like Ed Milet or anything like
no,
that.
he's fairly new. I mean, he's a software guy that is gotten into software coaching, and then he branched into then he got healthy. He didn't spend his life being healthy, but he got healthy and then created I think he has some kind of fitness coaching program, and then he got into business coaching, and he's just developing his own brand.
Right.
Anyways, so I joined his program, and it's kind of funny. You would think that I would have spent every moment there that I could, but I only spent about 5 or 6 weeks in his program, even though I bought a whole year and I haven't been back. And it's not because there's no value there. I just absorbed the value that I needed from it, and I haven't I haven't hit a point where I'm like, all right,
I need to go back.
I need to go back to get more so I can continue growing. I I've I still haven't I still haven't exhausted what I learned from that initial 5 weeks where I needed to go back.
I
Mindset.
actually think that that's a pretty important point to rest on for a second. Like a lot of people so I paid for last year I did a coaching thing with Think Media, which is a YouTube training course and there was I paid for it every month through the business and now we're, a year into it and I get to be a part of it for a lifetime now. So I can always go back to it, but like you, I was deep in it for 6, 8 weeks, and then and I still don't have massive YouTube success, but one of my channels is to almost 10,000 subscribers, which is cool. I don't own that channel. I manage that channel. Um, but we're getting close. It's kind of like a dual partnership. We share the profits of that. But um, again, I think that it's important for people to realize that like you can you don't have to read the whole book. You don't have to do the entire coaching program. Get the value that you need and then move on. I'm pretty sure Dan actually talks about that
Yeah.
quite often in a lot of his content, both in his book Buy Back Your Time and on his videos. Like get what you get what you need and then move on. And I'll spend, weeks or months reading a book because I don't know how to read very well. But I'll spend too much time because I'm like internalizing it instead of putting it into action.
Yeah, you have to turn things into action as quickly as possible, and, um,
That's what I had to
that
do
was
with
my whole
this.
focus last year, like,
Yeah,
that's why you built this, you
yeah.
turned it into action.
Which,
Yeah.
by the way, thank you for helping me.
Oh, I just helped to nail some stuff on the walls, it's
And it's okay.
no big deal.
He's incredibly helpful because
So
I couldn't do it myself.
main thing I learned from Dan was that I needed to have essentially my own personal brand, and that I needed to learn I needed to post on social media, but I hadn't been on social media since around 2006 when I deleted Facebook on purpose.
Right. Good choice.
And here I am. I need to start posting on Instagram. So I start posting on Instagram because, well, that's what I have to do. And I'm going to learn Instagram. Well, I don't know hooks. I don't know stories and I don't know anything. This is like the oldest thing I've ever done. I actually went to a realtor's class on how to use Instagram. So
Mm.
here I am with a bunch of, I'm the actually only, there was like 20 other women. I was the only male there, not that it matters. And she literally showed us how to sign up on Instagram and then how to create a reel.
Did
And
you pay for this?
uh, no, I think it was a free course. It was like, no, I did pay for it. Yeah. It was like $50.
Man, I think we're missing the mark on some things. In-person training is like the new it thing.
Well, it was the oldest thing I've ever been a part of. I'm like, this is literally an old person thing. Like, here's how to use a social media app. But I mean, I had to start somewhere. So I learned how to do it and I made my first reel and I started posting. And here's an interesting thing: you can say the same thing as someone else, but if you don't have the, um, let's see, how do I say this? So what's the right word? Let me get the right word because I want to say this right. You need like Dan Martell, Alex Ramosi. They have, it's not the brand. What word am I trying to think of? Um, they have the
Credibility?
credibility. All right. So here's something interesting. I can say the same thing as another person online, but without the credibility, it doesn't mean the same thing. So have you ever seen the artists or the musicians or the painters that go on the street and they try to sell their stuff? They have they might sell their painting for $1 million in the studio, but then they'll put it on the street and people won't give them $5 for it,
Right.
right? That's perceived value. So if they don't perceive value in that person, then the thing that they're saying or doing or showing has no value to them. So while I was saying the same things, all my methods that I eventually turned in my book, um, people don't perceive any value. Who are you? They don't know who I am.
Yep.
I'm saying the same thing as Dan Martell or Alex Hormozy or any of these people, uh, but it has no value because I'm a nobody, right? They don't know who I am. I don't have anything. So
Well,
I
and Instagram's a sea of a bunch of nobodies will use you,
saying valuable things,
saying valuable things that other people who are somebodies,
and they're all repeating the same stuff.
they're repeating, and it's just like scroll by.
Yeah. Well, that's where I was, and I realized it as I was doing it, and so I took a step back. I'm like, "All right, well, I need something to post. Like, who am I? I mean, I had like that existential moment where I'm like, well, who am I? Like, I don't know who I am. What do I know? Um, what do I have to share that's unique? And I really struggled with that for a little while. I actually ended up, and I ended up with this guy. He is a coach who coaches people on how to be coaches, right? And
That's very specific.
that's a lot of coaches in one sentence. And he was essentially on this exploratory call type thing. He was helping you figure out, like, well, what kind of coach would you like to be? What would you like to coach on? And I honestly didn't have the answer. I didn't know what to say. And I walked or, left that meeting kind of depressed, like, who am I? And
Thinking that the coach was the only way to go.
well, that was like the obvious, easy start, the choice, like I need something to coach on. What I had was these ideas in my head that I never had like actually written them all down in one place and decided, well, these are all the things.
Yeah.
And so I realized, okay, well, I need to learn how to write. So I took Dan Coe's writing courses. I took a couple of his courses actually, and I started learning how to write so I could post better and post better content online. And I took a few courses for various prices on, learning how to write hooks and the subjects and how to do all the right things to capture the audience in Instagram and social media. And I learned how to post on Twitter and all of the intricacies that go there. Um, and so I learned how to write, and I took these writing courses, and I started then and so I'll fast forward a little bit. So here I am, and I'm my oldest son Mason is turning 18, and he's going to be kind of like turning into a man. And I decided to write down a list of rules for him if he was going to stay at home. Like, you can stay at home. Here's the rules, right? And it was so dry, and there was no warmth in it, no connection, and so I tried to add in, like, some stories and some different things, and I kept adding to it and then learning about different things, and uh one day I realized, like, "Oh, this is actually a book, like, I could turn this into a book." And so what I ended up at is 4th generation formula, and it's all the systems and methodologies? I'm gonna
Methodologies?
go with the methodology that I have created in my life personally to get to the success that I have. And it's funny, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, a book had a certain structure.
Mhm.
Today, people only have about a 3-minute attention span.
Right.
I had to write my book in a way that a teenager would even read. So there's I mean, that's a whole nother story of like how you should structure a book. I mean, I have the right balance of stories and application, and I start in one story and then I skip to another one and then I go back, just all to try to capture the interest and I think it came out pretty good. I'm happy with it. Um, but the first thing I talk about is identity. I mean, that's the first chapter of the book is getting the identity right. Because if you don't know who you are and where you're going to go, then
Well, I
you'll
remember,
never
I
get
think
there.
don't you start the book in a hole?
Yeah, I mean, so you start realizing that I have some pretty good stories, like that.
And I'm not talking about a like a perceived hole. He starts the book in an actual hole.
Yeah, it's a crazy story. Here I am in El Paso on a job that we were completely unprepared for, in a hole 2 foot deep, staring at a giant chunk of concrete that nothing we had could remove. With all the equipment we had was half the size or less than it should have been. We had a saw that was laughably too small. And that's where I start the story in that hole. And the identity that I had to decide who we were going to be and how we were going to get out of that hole,
A literal hole.
literal hole.
Yeah.
And so,
And which, by the way, again, for those who have listened to the previous podcast, we're in Arizona. They had traveled to El Paso
Yeah.
to do the work. So, not only are they in a literal hole, but they're in a location where they can't just call upon people that they know. They're not in a town that they know. They have no connections in the space. So,
Well, we
it
didn't
was
know that the next morning when the plant came back online, well, actually, it was the Monday morning, it was just still over the weekend, that, when the plant came online, we had already broken the sewer line. So while we were pouring concrete, the sewer, all the water from the entire plant was all gonna start pouring into the floor while we were pouring concrete. You know, the crazy part is I actually got a time-lapse video of that job because which is great because no one would ever believe that it was true.
yeah.
But I actually have a video, and, we worked 80 hours in 4 days. You know, I mean, just, I had just enough time to take my GoPro and set it up on top of the cabinet and then go to work. Like, I didn't have time to plug it in, do anything, just hit record, you know, and
Mhm.
leave it. And so it runs until the battery dies. And so I have this short, like, I don't know, 1 minute clip or whatever on YouTube. And that's actually a really cool thing that I did in my book. I I created what I is unique. I don't think anybody's doing it yet. I know
Mhm.
I'm not really sure why, but I created a companion website and then a QR code system that's in the book. So each chapter has its own QR code that takes you to the corresponding chapter on the website. And like chapter one takes you there and you can see the actual video of us in the hole pouring concrete. You can see the plumbers down in that 3-foot hole over there trying to fix the problem, and you can see all the things that I talk about in the book for that story
Mm.
in that video, right?
Oh, that's rad.
And then, like, the second chapter is about character and, um, um, well, each chapter has its own thing, and each chapter has its own QR code, and they can go there. And the idea is just to help validate the stories, add more depth, and then add more value to the readers, and
Mm.
ultimately my kids, who I wrote it to.
Right.
Um, but that was fun, because I got to build out the website to match it, and I don't actually have it done yet, but I have a interview with my parents, and the story of the character that they instilled into me, and the story of they had my dad deposited a $490 check from a job that he did pouring concrete, and the bank it showed up as $4,900 in their account. And when they went to tell the bank about it, they told them they were crazy and that they couldn't trace it and that they should keep it. But they gave it back anyways, right? And they had to force the bank to take that money back. And the reason that matters is because they had $5,000 in debt at the time. So, I talk about the character that created in me and um, the importance of it.
Yeah.
I talk about, struggle. There's no growth without struggle. And as much as you want to give something to someone, if they don't go through the struggle to get there, they very rarely
Learn.
they very rarely get the true value that they would have gotten from it. So as much as I want to give my kids everything, I can't. Like I have to design the right struggles for them to help them become the person that they're supposed to be.
Well, I think too, one of the things that I would say today's society does is we try to make everything um, easy for our kids
Hmm.
to accomplish. And we know from experience, and this is part of why I think both of our families homeschool is failure is inevitable and failure is necessary.
Absolutely.
I I don't want my kids to grow up in a system that is you do this math test, and because you failed, you don't get to do it again. Because in real life, when you fail at something, you you learn what not to do. So, like, there's no opportunity in failing one test academically because you don't get to go back and repeat it again. Whereas, like, if I fail at this or if I take enough swings, eventually I'm going to learn what works right. Like, I'll say this: I started running ads for Mobile Podcast Trailer on Facebook, and many people would probably say maybe it's not the right target market. Well, because I ran my first ad and I didn't know what I was doing, and I've only run 2, but my first ad, I forgot to select Arizona as the geographic location to run the ad. And so I started getting leads in from all over the country. So I called one guy and he's like, "Oh, I'm in Massachusetts." And I was like, "Whoa." He goes, "I would really like you to come out here and do," and I'm like, "I'm gonna be really expensive if I have to drive all the way across the country." But what it did is I learned. You could call it a failure, but I learned that I need to make sure that I have that location turned on. I also learned that I need to be a little bit more clear in what I'm articulating on the video ad. Like, there are people that just don't they think that I'm selling an app, and I'm not selling an app.
Mhm.
I'm selling a service. And so, there's just things that I'm unpacking, and they're not failures. They're ways for me to learn what to do the next time. And so, I changed it up, and I did another ad where I start the ad in a shopping cart with Emmett pushing me in the grocery store.
I saw that one.
And that one has converted a lot, and there are people that absolutely love it, and they'll talk about it. But I've gotten, 30 or 40 leads, and so I've had several conversations, and you could call the first one a failure, um, but really what it is it's an opportunity for me to pivot because I learned what I shouldn't have done and implemented a little bit better operation of what I should do.
In my book, what it ultimately comes down to, I boil everything down to, is 3 things. If you decide who you're going to be and you start immediately and you never stop pushing towards that goal, there's nothing that'll stop you. Like, the only result of that is the success um, or landing at that point, right?
Or the lesson,
Or the lesson.
you know.
But those 3 things are all that matters, and that's what you're talking about, is that action part, right? Elon Musk just launches his rockets into the air and lets them explode. He could do like Jeff Bezos and endlessly test and never launch anything and then never lose a rocket. But Elon Musk is already launching and landing rockets, on chopsticks in the middle of
Yep.
Texas. I mean, what he's accomplished because of that action is unmatchable. Like, nobody can match what he's doing.
NASA can't even match what he's doing.
Well, they're yeah, that's a whole
NASA
nother
is
story.
not a space agency. So,
No, they're a government bureaucracy, but that's
it's
a whole nother story.
another place for him to put our money.
They're not in competition anyways, but um, that action is so important. And most people, I talk about that. I mean, so I had a neighbor who had this shed that he wanted to build, and he had drawings, he had schematics, he had measurements, he had designs. You know what he never had?
The action to build it.
The shed,
Yeah.
right? He never built the shed. I mean, yeah, okay, he had all these cool things, but he never actually had the shed. Like, who cares? Like, people plan and plan and plan, but they never act. And you have to act. I probably should plan more than I do sometimes. But that is one thing I know I am good at, is action. Like, once I spend very little time thinking things through, I start. Um, whether it's in construction or anything else. I mean, I well, my excavator attachment, which the patent should be out here real soon. Um, I I built that just out of in my head. I didn't even draw anything. I made a little Lego thing, and I was like, "All right, the physics, that makes sense." And then I made it out of wood, and then I was out there welding steel together, and creating it. I didn't spend months thinking or designing or coming up with the perfect drawing. I just made it.
Yeah. Well, and, like, that's you know, when we when I acquired this trailer and started getting all the stuff to put it in, you were the person that was like, "Okay, when are you coming over?" Like, I came over right to where we're at right this moment and put it you can see it on my YouTube channel, um, my other YouTube channel. Maybe I'll release it here too. But, I you put this into action. I didn't know, like, I could have figured it out, but it probably would have taken me weeks to do as it took me, months and months to patch a hole in my ceiling at home. Mainly because I'm often afraid to take action because I don't know. And so like this will be kind of a good look into who I am. Um Several years ago, my wife and I renovated our Central Phoenix home, and I said I was going to build a butcher block countertop. And we had created an island in our small kitchen. And for a long time, we had a piece of plywood on it. And Stephanie was like, I'm tired of this plywood. When are you going to put, you know, the butcher block countertop in? I was like, well, I need to build it. And she's like, when are you going to take the time? And it really came down to was I was afraid to mess up. I was afraid to spend the money on all of the material and mess up. And again, like this took me a year of thinking and then finally we executed on it. And a lot of people will go, wow, that happened really quick. But like I spent a lot of time in my head overthinking everything. And eventually I just got to a point where I was like super tired of waiting.
I
So,
think I think what happens is once you get over that fear and you realize that nothing that comes from this is going to be bad, right? There's no downside to failure as long as you learn a lesson.
hmm
Um, once you get to that mental state, then action becomes the only thing you want to do. Because if I don't act on this, you get that sense of anxiety, that urgency in you. Like if I don't act on this, I'm going to miss something. I'm going to miss a lesson or a blessing, right? That's what
yeah,
Dan Martell says. Um, once you get to that bright mental state, only action is left. Like you don't want to plan at all. I only want to act. I started last year on a software called Voice Quote, and it allows people to speak the contents of their quote for the proposal to a customer, right? So like a plumber could send a proposal over to their client. They can just speak it into their phone and it spits it all out and makes this really nice proposal, and they just hit send because a lot of I call them dashboard contractors. They are the single solopreneurs. They have 2 kids at home in volleyball. They gotta get them to practice. They gotta get
yep,
to the school, gotta go to church. They gotta go to the hospital. Like, they're up at midnight trying to write new proposals. Those are the guys that I think would be good for. Anyways, I moved so fast on that I'll fast forward through some of it, but I spent $50,000 to have an MVP built, and I got nothing from it.
and what does MVP stand for? Because
Minimum viable product. So that's a
minimum viable
software
product.
term, right?
Okay.
What you want to do is you want to build an MVP that is the least amount possible and then get it in someone's hands and see, do they have any value? What do they like? What do they don't like? And then you pivot and you say, all right, that worked. Let's go farther with that. Well, that didn't work. Let's go over here.
Yep.
And that allows you to spend the least amount of money possible to develop the software into the right software.
Yeah.
Um,
Kinda like what we're sitting in now. This is the the
yeah, the
MVP.
MVP, right?
Yeah.
So that applies to a lot of things. Well, so I spent $50,000 on an MVP, and I could get really worked up over that and blame the guy for stealing my money and whatever. I could get all worked up
Yeah.
on it, or I could move on, right? I see that as a lesson. I learned a lot from that, and
1, don't give $50,000 right away.
well, yeah, I learned like he didn't have a timeline. It was just by the week, and he said it would be 6 to 8 weeks, and at 11 weeks, he said maybe 8 weeks more, right? And so it just turned into this forever thing. Turns out he was struggling personally with his own things and had his own projects going, and he was just using my money like a Ponzi scheme to try to keep what he was going, and he was failing, right?
Yeah.
And I was enabling him to continue, and it was just whatever. My point is that I could look at that um, as a negative thing and make me afraid to move forward again. But really, what it was is like the most valuable thing I did last year, right? Excuse me.
You're good.
That led to the things that would have to happen for me to end up with at Oscar where I am today. The um, the crazy part is the software that I built now will enable me to make voice quote, that original software,
Mhm.
as like a little side project.
Yeah.
The software I built, Oscar, is the engine that will power voice quote. So now I basically created the back end. Well, Oscar is not a back end, but I'm saying what I can do is I can now adapt that as a back end to voice quote, and I can
Yeah.
make that software also. And I tried to get a friend of mine to partner with me and help me finish voice quote, right? And here's the stuff, and I don't know what it is. Take it and turn it into a product. And he ghosted me. Like, dang it. And so now I'm sitting on this $50,000 loss, and I can't get anybody to help me with it. I don't even know where it is anymore, right? I mean,
Right.
it's just this repository somewhere, and that was another downside. But because he did that, um, I went back and I focused on my book. Like, all right, well, I'm going to work on my book, and I finished my book. And because I finished the book, I hired a developer to build a website. And he's like, I had a certain idea of how I wanted to do it. He's like, I don't know if I could do that. And long story short, he showed up and he got me set up in VS Code. VS Code is like a just a way to write software. Sets me up in VS Code, and I was horrible at it. It was so hard. I'm like, this is not going to work, and I don't know what I'm going to do. I finally pushed through it, and I built my own website in VS Code. So now I built my own website, and well, then I'm developing further down the road, and I'm finishing up my book, and I'm starting to decide what am I going to do next. And that put me at the point where I realized all these steps was going to lead me to being a coach, and I really don't want to be a coach. I like helping people. I liked helping you build this trailer, right? I really like helping people. I don't like being a coach, and I don't want to be obligated, and I don't want to try to sell my energy every week on a call where I have to convince people that I'm super excited, and it's not that I'm excited, but I don't come across that way. And coaching isn't for me, right?
Right.
That's I had that call with the guy, and he's like trying to tell me what kind of coach I could be. I'm not a coach. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking about it, and I realized that, well, what I need is something to be the coach for me. And ultimately, what that led to is Oscar. And I realized that, well, if I can build a website, I can build a web app. It's just some JavaScript, right? There's not a big difference between a
Right.
website and a web app. And I can already build a web app in VS Code like I'm already doing. And so I went from concept to 200,000 lines of code in 1 month. Um, and then I'm a couple of weeks past that now with a alpha launch and like a real viable product, right? Oscar's a multi-model thinking partner is how I position him. He's everything that I wish AI already was, and all the limits that I kept hitting as I progressed and learned AI last year, I developed into Oscar.
Okay.
So he he has a council where he has 4 different AIs and they all answer in parallel and then debate back and forth until they find a consensus and one final answer. And the answers are really good. Like it's really impressive the depth that you get out of it. Um, I've never found anywhere else.
And how's the like the hallucination metric of it?
So hallucination happens when you just get too much context and it can't keep up. Oscar has a indexed vault of users' information, but he also indexes all of his own conversations that he had with the user. So all of those things, instead of trying to hold them in context, he has them indexed and accessible in the background where he doesn't have to hold all that all the time. And I have an entire part built out to him where he understands the user, what their preferences are, what they like. He knows how to understand their development over time. He can um, offer insights that they wouldn't notice. He understands where they were yesterday, where they are today, and what that means that of where they're going to be and where they are going to be tomorrow, and where they want to be, and
Mhm.
what they should be doing to get there. Um, it's basically Jarvis, right? So the idea is that Jarvis is in Tony Stark's house. He's in his suit. He's in his phone. He's on his in his glasses. Right. Jarvis is the same, and so that's how I developed Oscar. The idea is that Oscar isn't just a ChatGPT window where you type it in and he answers.
Right.
Oscar is this companion, this thinking partner that you can access from multiple places, and over time it'll be more places. Um, but you can have this conversation, and every time you pick up a conversation, even if you're picking it back up with him in VS Code, he already knows what you were thinking about. So to develop Oscar, I would have these thinking, I will call them thinking sessions, strategy sessions with AI, ChatGPT or Claude, and I would think through the concepts until I had designed out the entire part of Oscar that I wanted, and then
Mhm.
I would turn that into a spec document. Then I would bring it into VS Code, and then I would work on it in VS Code to develop that part of Oscar. And that was my manual way of doing what now Oscar can do. One of the crazy things is Oscar, my account, um, I have his knowledge base, my vault, my collection of information that's personal to me.
Mhm.
He has access to all of his own code. So he has indexed information on himself that he's completely access. So now that I have Oscar up and running, I can ask Oscar about himself and how he can analyze his own systems. He can analyze all the spec documents and build documents that I created along the way and help me improve himself. It's like a level of self-aware that I honestly don't know how how um how often that happens or where it happens. Really the only places that can do something like that is like a Anthropic or a OpenAI where they can have their model training on itself, right?
Yeah, because I think in ChatGPT, I've never done it before, but basically, like at a very low level of what you're talking about, um, pe people can basically um, create a prompt and to ask questions, and then at the end they say, "Now, based off of all of this information, write me the best prompt for this discussion." so that we can revisit it later or something along
Mhm.
those lines. And it will pump out the prompt that will initiate that.
You know, it's interesting. I landed on a lot of philosophical things in my designing of Oscar that I didn't realize I was going to do. Right.
Mhm.
Um, uh, the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. The answer is 42, and the book is basically the idea that the answer isn't important, it's the question. And that's what most people don't understand with AI is it's the question that you ask, which
Right.
typically people will refer to as a prompt, right? The and so I spent a lot of time in Oscar designing how to do that better, like how to guide the user to ask better questions because a better question leads to a better answer. And
Yeah.
a better answer leads to more value, right? That's my whole goal is to provide the most value to the user. And asking the right questions is really important because if you and I have no context, then and I ask you a question, you're gonna give me a generic answer. But we
I'm
have a
gonna
lot of
hallucinate.
context in our relationship, right? In our history,
Yeah.
like any friend that you have, where we have the context where I can ask you a question and you base it off of that context. And
Well, you're pulling from the vault of your
so
relationship.
in Oscar, that vault is ever evolving. And the more you're using, the deeper that vault gets and the more value he has. And instead of, say, OpenAI or Claude, where you have this new conversation every time, it's like, hey, who are you? Let's talk.
Yeah.
Oscar knows who you are at a deeper level than most people know themselves. And the longer they use him, the deeper that relationship gets and the better his answers get.
That's awesome. I know, I just so I have not paid for any. I actually have VO3, the, um, the Google AI
Gemini?
Gemini. Yeah. I think I'm paying for that. I should figure out how to turn that off, and at least pay for ChatGPT. But, because that's the one I use the most.
No, I'm gonna give you an access code to Oscar here pretty soon. You can get rid of all your subscriptions.
And this is the reason why I am doing this podcast today. Sponsored by Oscar.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I'll sponsor
Actually,
you.
that is a good idea. We
I
should
mean,
sponsor this one.
I can,
Uh,
sponsor you when I have money. I mean, I gotta make money first. That's
dude, me.
alright, maybe I didn't tell you, so I've analyzed what I've been able to build in
Yep.
Oscar, and, people don't realize the change that's coming. The way SaaS has been done in the past is
Mhm.
fundamentally going to change.
Oh, yeah.
I spent less than $1,000 to write 200,000 lines of code in a month, okay?
And
And
equate that to what it would cost to.
a team of 16, 18 people, a year and a half.
Okay, and how much
And
money?
with 5 or $6 million, multiple VC funding rounds, Series A, I mean, all the things of venture capitalism that it takes.
Yeah.
I talk about that in my book. Venture capitalism, I compare it to the Cones of Dunshire from Parks and Rec,
Okay.
right?
Never watched Parks and Rec,
All right. Well,
but
for
I'm
those that
down
have,
for the story.
imagine the nerdiest game ever
Okay.
with rules so complex that nobody can understand it. Right. That's a whole idea behind the Cones of Dunshire, and those games do exist in real life, and I'm sure
Yes.
they're fun, but they'll take a week to play,
Right.
and then they're just absurdly complex. That's the way venture capitalism is and SaaS in general. And the rules were written by the venture capitalists. So when a founder says, "Oh, I had a $12 million exit," well, what that really means is they made, say, 1 million bucks
Or
because
yeah.
they had to give away so much of their company to get to the point that they could sell it for 12 million that
Yep.
there's no money left. Every time you have a funding round, they say, "Well, my company today has a future valuation of $2 million, and I will give you 30% of that for $600,000." And then that person gives them check for $600,000, and then they give them 30% of their company and back, and now they only own 70%, right?
Right.
And you continue down, and when you run out of money, you do that again, and every time you lose a little piece of
Yeah,
your
you're
company.
you're you're giving away elements of your company,
Yeah, and
and you
those
only have
rules
100 to give away.
those rules are written by the people that are making all the money. That venture capitalists are the ones, and they should be. They're the ones taking on the risk, right?
Right.
Otherwise, the guy that created the program, he's just an idea guy, and he can build, and I'm sure
He's an
he's got
idea
his
guy that's
ability,
actually taking execution.
but he doesn't have any money.
Yeah.
And so what's changing with AI specifically is that's no longer a necessary thing. I don't need someone else's money. I don't need a team of people. AI can write the code. I
Yeah.
just, so what's important now is people that understand architecture and building, right? The people that can see the cathedral they're building, not the wall that they're putting up. I actually wrote a white paper on spoken development that I'm basically creating as I build Oscar.
Mhm.
The idea is that if you build something, you can, just like the plans for a house, right? The blueprints for a house.
Yeah.
If you can describe something in enough detail, then you can build it easily. So if I describe a house in enough detail on a set of plans, a contractor can go build it.
Right.
Software is no different. 80% of software is the same thing. Like there's no very little difference percentage wise
Right.
from one software to the next. And if I build Oscar completely and then in hindsight describe him, if I would have had that set of directions when I started Oscar, then
Sorry
like
about
this perfect picture of how he's going to end up, then it would have been really easy to build him, just like building anything the second time.
Right.
So now apply that towards a any software. Well, if you already know what 80%, maybe more of the software already looks like, you can already design that. So there's very little function in UI left to build. And if you can define what those are, and then describe them well enough, then you already have a software. And the building part, AI,
Mhm.
is the easy part. So that's what I'm developing next.
Yeah.
Um, I won't get into everything that version 2 of Oscar is gonna be, but, version 1 is just a stepping stone for me to get to version 2 because that's where I'm actually really excited about.
Well, I think too, a lot of, Eli and I, when we were on our way here, we were talking about the first generation iPhone. Um, and I remember, so, my wife bought me the first gen iPhone, and when it first came out, it had nothing on it. Basically, like the email app, the
Mhm.
camera app, the it didn't even have the App Store. Like that came in an update later because nobody, like, the App Store wasn't there yet.
Mhm.
Like that whole economy wasn't even there at that point. But if they never would have, if they would have been like, "Oh, well, we'll put it out at version 17 where we're at now," they they would have been left behind in in the boom of the cell phone or, smartphone movement. They would have been left behind pretty quick. So,
Well,
like, version 2 got better, and it's like we're all the way at version 17 of the iPhone. You know, clearly when you get to version 17 of Oscar, this is gonna be light years.
I'll tell you why I'm so excited about version 2, because version 2 is the marketplace that I'm gonna build, and here's what I've done. I created Oscar as a tool, and just like a shovel, if I define what a shovel is, that it only digs holes, and I put you in this box where that's only thing shovel can do, then you don't realize that maybe you could slide on the ice in a shovel, or you could swat at a fly, right? You can use a shovel for whatever you want. So,
Right.
um, what I did is I've done my best to design Oscar as a tool and not to define what that tool does precisely, so that I can let the market decide how should Oscar best be used? One of the things I'm really excited about is the day where there's YouTubers that are professionals at showing you how to use Oscar,
Mm,
right? Because he's got a lot of capabilities, and I was careful not to define what every single thing does and how it should definitely
mhm,
only be used to where they can find all kinds of cool things that my imagination didn't come up with, and so I'm placing that tool in their hands. And version 2 is when that that the power of that, uh, you know, uh, goes up exponentially.
right. Well, I think too, once you put it in the hands of the public, because it's not there yet, but when you put it in the hands of the public, it'll take on a different, meaning, and the market will tell you also, like, the direction that it needs to go in, and
Yeah.
it'll help elevate it even more. So
You
it's
know,
gonna be it's gonna be pretty interesting.
I see everything as lines on charts. Um,
I don't.
if you talk about something, I end up doing this motion a lot with my hands,
Mhm,
and I just actually realized it recently that nobody knows what I'm doing with my hands, but in my head, I'm describing a curve on a line, right? I mean, I always did good in math. I took all the math that I could, and um, I conceptualize everything back down into graphs, and I'll see a growth curve or a whatever it is in my head. And so I wanted a way for Oscar to be able to visualize data the way I like to. And um, that actually turned into an entire studio that's really cool. Like he has the ability to create a game and then instantly put that game up on a rendered page where you
uh-huh,
can play it. So you can like play a tic-tac-toe game or create a side-scrolling shooter game, right? And it's like this little side thing that's just kind of fun.
right,
Mostly because I was hoping that it would help my kids like have fun with the app and be
mhm,
able to fiddle around with it and spend time making games. But the reason I started on that path was just because I wanted to see charts and graphs and have it rendered right there.
interesting. Um,
But there's all kinds of things that I expect users
right,
that was my point is that all kinds of things that users and all kinds of things that I expect users will develop through that tool and that process and find ways to do it because you can have Oscar create a version of what it is you're going to do and then have a conversation with him about how you want to change it, and
mhm,
adapt it and change it just kind of like what you're used to in AI anyways, but it's all right there live on your screen. And then since I have multi-model capability, I actually have an expert on Oscar's side. He's a expert code engineer, right? Talking to the other side, the API call, who is actually building it, right? Because any AI that you operate with is just an API call. So when you're asking ChatGPT, all it's doing is going to OpenAI and
right,
asking it a question and then responding with the answer. So Oscar's the same way. He goes and but he's a professional and expert at code also. So he's an expert asking the other expert what to how to build it and more than just the user can do. So it amplifies what you could normally do with just OpenAI.
and so this is like, Oscar is kind of the one-stop shop because it's also referencing the other AIs
So
in
the
the
one thing
process.
I won't ever have to compete with, right? Because I can't beat OpenAI or Anthropic or any of these. Google. I mean, I have no ability to compete with them. I can't make a better AI. I'm not even making an AI. I'm just using AI to do all the things that I wish they already were doing. Like
Right,
these are all it's just all the limits that I kept hitting in AI this year. I'm like, why doesn't it do that? So when I built Oscar, I just created those abilities in Oscar and I figured out, well, how do I get that result? What is actually necessary? And I built those things. Um, and so what I don't have to compete with though is OpenAI, which is ChatGPT, was never gonna show you Anthropic's Claude side
Mhm.
by side. They're not gonna print those on the same screen because
Right.
they're never gonna show you their competitor next to them unless they can prove that they're significantly better. Whereas in Oscar, I don't have that problem, right? So I can use all of the AI companies that are out there, and all of them have unique perspectives, and they were all trained slightly different. They have semantic, different semantics on the how they handle things. I mean, Claude has a different way of looking at things than OpenAI's ChatGPT does. There's benefits to both, and
Right.
I'm able to benefit from all of those unique capabilities inside of Oscar by using all of the AIs. And over time, I'll actually add more. There'll be more
Well, there's gonna
models
be yeah,
available.
there's gonna be a lot more large language models to come, right? As we
Yeah, as it
I
gets cheaper, Grok, not Elon Musk's Grok, but Grok is a model that I think they trained it for like $1 million. I don't know the whole story on it. But basically they came in and disrupted everything because they didn't have any big money, so they had to learn how to do it for cheaper. So you have OpenAI with just billions in funding, and they're just dumping money and nothing's too expensive to do, right?
right,
Then you have Grok where they don't have that much money. So they had to figure out, well, how do we do it on less money? And so they created a really capable AI trained on just pennies compared to everybody else.
right.
And that'll keep on going. The evolution of AI is that they're already training on all the same data. They're training on the entire internet at this point, right? Um, as AI progresses, there will be less and less value. So today, knowledge is cheap, but implementation is everything.
Yeah,
So if I enable you to do something, if I help you accomplish your goals, that's where the value is. Used to be, I had to go to college for 10 years to be a doctor, and I had to pay a lawyer that had spent the last 20 years being a lawyer to get that knowledge.
right.
Today, I can ask ChatGPT, or I can do a Google search, and I can get 90%
Yeah.
of what they can do for basically free. So that knowledge, that value that knowledge had before doesn't exist now. So it's all implementation, which is what Oscar is, right? He's that implementation layer. He is the person that a user can access all that knowledge and um, think through it and have this thinking partner that helps them become the person, the thing, the goal, like get to the place that they want to be.
Well, and would you say then this revolution, we're already at a place where um people don't see the value of higher education, college. Would you say that we're at a place where we're gonna run into a scenario where people are just gonna be like, I'm gonna learn, you know, like a lot of people say YouTube University, but I'm gonna learn on Oscar, I'm gonna learn on this, where now like lot of things of life are gonna be able to be executed by really you're still learning, but you're just not paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to go and execute,
So I'm being careful because I really don't want to discuss version 2 of Oscar.
right?
Um, so that'll have to be another podcast. But
In the future. Come back for that.
but version 2 solves all those problems, like, or at least it um it it's not that it solves it. It man, what's the right word? It uses it like it what's it what dang it, what's
I
the right
don't know.
word? I don't know the right word, but I'm searching for right now. Anyways, version 2 will use that to its benefit. Like it will help users and creators at a in a way that has never doesn't exist right now. I'm actually really excited about that part. Um, like, version 1 is amazing, and it's so capable, and the answers you can get are impressive. Getting synthesis from 12 different answers, from different AIs and putting it all in one answer is phenomenal what you can do, and the vault and the time that he can understand, it's impressive, but it pales in comparison of how excited I am for version 2.
So, would you say that, you know, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini are just really quick reference points for, um, like when we were kids and Google came out, the Google search was, it always kind of gave you an explanation of how quickly it referenced everything. Like I remember it would be like 12,000 references
Oh, yeah.
in, you know,
Tell you how many
25 seconds or
places it
whatever.
found, yeah.
Yeah. Um, would you say that really at the root of it, AI is just a a referencing tool to basically get a quicker answer on, what we would call a Google search?
No, let's look at that two couple different things. First of all, nobody ever goes past the 3rd page, and,
Right.
I don't even think they fill up the pages, and then you find out that a lot of the stuff that they want you to see, they just repeat on other pages. That's just a number to sell you on Google. Why AI is better, and I don't know if you're already doing it, but I haven't done a Google search or an internet search in a long time. I
No, so let's see. I don't do very many searches on Google anymore. And when I'm trying to find a place, I go to the maps.
If it's a
So,
physical place here in town, I go to
right,
Maps,
yeah, I
but,
go to the
like,
maps.
I found a, bookkeeping firm
Uh-huh.
that is, like, the most perfect match to our franchise that I could ever imagine, and I found that in an AI search. I found a engineering firm for my excavator attachment that is perfect. They're in, like, Minnesota or something, I don't forget where they are, but there is literally the perfect company for what I wanted, and that's because I described what I was looking for to AI, and I had it search, and so that gets us back to the Google search, right?
Right,
What makes the AI search what makes it powerful is it's better at finding the, the right information. So who cares if you found 100,000 instances of a word and you're never gonna do that. What do you really care about? You care about the 5 that are on the first page.
right.
And if you get those 5 right, then the rest of them don't matter. So AI is very good, and that's why the vault in Oscar is so powerful. He is really good at understanding your projects and your documentation and your chat histories and like because I took you can download all your chat history from ChatGPT,
Yep.
Claude, and AIs and up and put them in Oscar. So Oscar has all of the history of every conversation I've had with AI in him also. I didn't lose any of that. And he understands that, and with all of his indexing and chunking and everything that goes into it, he understands it at a level that me or you would never get to. I was
Right.
I was actually telling him about uh the time in Limitless when he's sitting in the car with Robert De Niro
Mhm.
and he hands him that folder, and so he's got this big folder and he's looking through it, and then all of a sudden Cooper sits back and he's like, "Wait a second." And what he does is he realizes what uh De Niro is actually doing, right? I forget what is he taking over a corporation, he's like forcing people out. He's kind of a bad guy.
Right.
Anyways, the documentation was just a bunch of financial stuff, but he was able to piece together what it really meant. And that's what Oscar can do. He can piece those things together at a level that most people can't see.
I think that that will be interesting because, um, the reason why I bring it up is yesterday when I got home, Stephanie and my oldest daughter, Jocelyn, were looking over a bill that's being presented in the House in Arizona to adjust the age of driving. So they want to change it to they want to change the age to, I think, 15 for your permit. And then they want to extend the duration of your permit. So instead of 6 months, they want to change it to 18 months. And so you would still be able to drive when you're 15 with a permit, but the duration of time with your permit's longer, so you can't get your license until you're 16 and a half. Well, that was hard to decipher in all of the legal jargon. And so it's like Oscar sounds like we can upload the bill into Oscar and go, tell me what it's really trying to say.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, I mean,
which will
that's a
be
pretty, high level thing, like, you can already do that in ChatGPT or
probably, yeah.
Claude, then that's a pretty easy thing, um,
Well, I,
that
so
doesn't require, like, the deeper level of thing that Oscar can do,
yeah,
um, but he can also do both.
yeah, yeah. Well, so I guess because we talked about your book, but then we switched to Oscar. And the reason why we're talking about the book and Oscar is the book drops today, the day that this is coming out. And so what we're going to do is I'll put a link to the book because you're going to have it on Amazon, I'm assuming,
Amazon, Barnes, all the places.
all the places. So be on the lookout for that. Link is in the description. And um, I'll say thanks for hanging out with me for 2 episodes of a podcast.
Yeah.
And we'll see you on the next one.